Unsolved missing persons cases will always drive me out of my mind. A person goes missing without a trace and their case is not solved. Sometimes the person's remains are found, but the case is still never solved. And even worse, sometimes not even a person's remains are even found. Cases like that get to me. But when there's an unsolved missing persons case where it's 3 people, it's cases like those that keep me up at night. On June 7th, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri, 19-year-old Susie Streeter, her mother, 47-year-old Cheryl Levitt, and Susie's friend, 18-year-old Stacy McCall, all went missing together. No trace of them has ever been found, and their case remains a mystery to this day. Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things. This week's video was chosen by my Patreons in a poll over there, as well as recommended to me by a subscriber. If you've ever been interested in joining the Patreon or have kind of thought about it, maybe today is the day. If you join the middle tier, which is only $5 a month, you get a monthly bonus uncensored video that is not only way looser than videos I post publicly, but it's never posted publicly. It's exclusively for Patreons. This month, I am doing the Bananas case of Byron David Smith, and we're going through the chilling audio and the surveillance footage that goes with that case. No matter what tier of the Patreon you join, everybody on there gets a monthly Netflix party with yours truly, and all of my patrons also get early access to most of my videos that I'll post publicly. So I'll post it usually about 24 hours in advance, and then not only do they get to watch it before everybody else, but I also turn off monetization until it goes public, so they also get to watch it ad-free. So if that interests you and you do have the means, the link will be at the top of the description below for my Patreon. So let's get right into the story. Let's talk about our victims first. So first we have Cheryl Elizabeth Levitt. Like I said, she was Susie's mom, oldest of the 3 that went missing. She was 47 years old at the time. She was actually a cosmetologist and had over 250 loyal clients. She was a very small woman, only 5 feet tall and about 110 pounds. Then we have Susie Streeter, Cheryl's daughter. She was only 5'2" and 102 pounds. She had blonde hair, brown eyes, just like her mother. She was actually held back in the 2nd grade, which is why she was 19 years old when she graduated instead of 18. She had plans to become a cosmetologist just like her mom, who she was reportedly extremely close to. Last in the group, we have Stacy McCall, Susie's friend. She was 5'3", 120 pounds, and had longer, darker blonde-ish, dirty blonde hair and lighter colored eyes. She was going to go to Southwest Missouri State for college and was planning to go into a sorority there. Earlier that day, on June 6th, 1992, all 3 of them had attended the Kickapoo High School's graduation ceremony, where both Susie and Stacy proudly commemorated their completion of high school. Like most of the kids graduating that day, Stacy and Susie both had plans to go to parties later that night to celebrate. They were spotted at a party in Battlefield that night, and then later they were also seen by witnesses at a party in Springfield. So the girls actually, they were planning to party basically, into the night. And then after they were done partying, their plan was to go to a city called Branson. Branson is really close to the Whitewater theme park, which is where everybody was going to go, as a group the next day to spend the day at this water park. So Susie and Stacy, they planned to go to Branson and stay at a hotel that night in order to be nice and close for their festivities the next day. But the girls actually changed their minds about halfway through the night. Stacy's mom was actually very relieved when Stacy called her at about 10:30 p.m. to let her know that they were not going to drive to the hotel. Stacy's mom, Janice, was concerned about them driving that late at night and that far, especially worried, if they were going to be drinking and stuff like that. She told her mother on this 10:30 p.m. phone call that the two girls were actually going to crash at their friend Janelle Kirby's house. All three girls had been friends since they were pretty little, like in grade school. Janice and I believe Stacy had been friends since they were toddlers. So they were going to crash there instead, and Janice was very happy about this, relieved that she knew her daughter was safe. However, a few hours later, their plans actually changed again. When they got to Janelle's house to crash, Janelle's house, they discovered, was actually pretty crowded, as Janelle had other family in town at the time, probably to celebrate her graduation, and so the house was just kind of full, and Susie and Stacy decided it wouldn't be very comfortable to stay there, especially because Susie said that at her house, she had just gotten a brand new king-sized waterbed. Remember how waterbeds were a thing in the 90s. And she got this from her mother as a graduation gift. And she said, hey, we could just go crash at my house and then we'd be really comfortable there. We'd have a lot of space. And then in the morning, we'll come back to Janelle's house to meet them to drive to Branson to go to the water park. So in the very early morning hours of June 7th, Susie and Stacy returned to the 1717 East Del Mar Street home in Springfield, Missouri. Both girls were last seen that night a little after 2 a.m. and it is believed that they made it home to Susie's house around 2:30 a.m. Because it was the middle of the night, because it was past 2 in the morning, Stacy decided not to call her mother again, just to wake her, to let her know that their plans changed again. She didn't think it was that big of a deal. She was just going to Susie's house. They weren't driving far, they were safe, etc. And so as far as Stacy's parents knew, she was at Janelle's house. So while the girls were out partying, this is what 47-year-old Cheryl's night looked like. It was pretty uneventful, but it is important to note that she was last heard from at 11:15 p.m. the night before on June 6th. She talked to a friend on the phone at this time and told the friend that she was working on painting a wardrobe. They had just purchased the house a couple months before all this went down, and so Cheryl was working on various things like that throughout the house on this night. She also apparently told this friend that she had a stomach ache, but that was probably from eating pizza with Susie earlier in the night. Okay, so back to Susie and Stacy. Like I said, detectives believe that they went back to Susie's mom, Cheryl's house at about 2:30 a.m. We assume that they went to bed at this point, as Susie's large waterbed had evidence that people had been sleeping in it. They, of course, probably wanted to get at least a couple hours of sleep before they got up early to go to the water park the next day. However, when the first friend called the house at around 8 a.m. that morning, nobody picked up the phone. I believe other friends had been also trying to call, and I think, of course, nobody thought anything of it. They believed that, hey, they were out till past 2 a.m. They're probably just slept through the alarm, or they were probably just sleeping in a little bit and hadn't woken up. So Janelle Kirby, remember her, she was the one that the girls were planning to sleep at her house originally, but decided to change their plans. Her and her boyfriend went to Susie's house to see what the heck was up. They had been waiting for the girls to show up at her house to leave for the water park, and they never showed. At this point, I have a feeling the two were like kind of laughing about it and thought that they would pull in and basically have to throw pillows at them to get up and to, follow through with their plans. They really probably thought nothing of it, or thought that they were goofing off or just being, teenagers. But when Janelle arrived, the scene was also just strange. I mean, she thought they were all home. All three of the women's cars were parked in the driveway. Before going in, they did kind of scope around the house a little bit and, seeing if they could spot anybody. But when I think they knocked on the door and when nobody answered, Janelle finally tried the door and the door was unlocked. The porch light had been shattered, and that's a very important detail. The porch light had been shattered, the bulb was still intact, so there was glass all over the porch. So the two went ahead and entered the home since it was unlocked, and they were calling out Susie and Stacy's name, but the house was empty. So I think they probably thought that was odd, but they still were not panicking. They assumed that they all went somewhere. Clothing, jewelry, keys, and the purses of Susie and Stacy were in the house, which tells us that they did in fact make it home after the parties for sure. Another odd thing was that Susie and her mom were both very heavy smokers, like chain smokers, and their cigarettes were also left behind. It's very unlikely they would have gone anywhere without them. There was even an untouched graduation cake still in the refrigerator. And then last, sadly, the family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, was also found. The dog was completely unharmed, but of course seemed very anxious. So overall, there was no signs of a crime or a struggle. So still, no alarm bells are going off for these two. They assumed, they left their stuff there. Maybe they went for a walk. Maybe they just went with Cheryl, who had her wallet, and they went to go grab something to eat, and they were going to be back really quick. So they left their cigarettes and everything else at home. So unfortunately, quite unfortunately, probably one of the most unfortunate things about this case, other than the missing women themselves, is that Janelle's boyfriend swept up the glass on the porch because he thought he was helping. They didn't think it was a crime scene, and so innocently he swept it up. But that was probably the biggest clue that investigators could have gone off on, and it was just destroyed. Remember this for yourselves. I know most people know this, especially people that listen to a lot of true crime, but if you have any inkling that something is going on, try not to touch anything. I can understand going in the house to make sure that nobody was home, and I totally understand the fact that this was an innocent mistake. I don't blame them for this at all. But if you have any inkling that something weird is happening, maybe just don't touch anything just in case. Not until you've confirmed everything is fine. Just be on the safe side. Same happens if you find anything weird out on the street, don't touch it. If you need to call 911, wait till they get there. So Janelle and her boyfriend Mike went to other places. They kind of started driving around looking for them. They again thought maybe they were close by on a walk, eating something at a restaurant somewhere, or grabbing something really quick. And so they started driving around just trying to track the girls down. I'm sure at this point Janelle was probably starting to get annoyed because they were like blowing her off basically and taking forever. I would have been annoyed at least. Finally, after they really could not find them, they finally started contacting family members. So Janice, if you recall, is Stacy's mother, was contacted, and Janice came very quickly over to the house. And soon they were telling a bunch of friends and family in the area, and everybody then started looking for the women. Again, at this point, everyone still figured that they were just out somewhere. There was some misunderstanding. They got stranded somewhere, and that this was not an emergency. And again, because of this, same, almost as tragic as the glass being picked up, a dozen to 18 people, I've heard various sources say different things, but at least a dozen people were walking in and out of Cheryl and Susie's house. They were walking around the house. People were cleaning up parts of the house because, again, they thought they were helping. Everybody expected the women to walk through the door any minute, so they thought they might as well just kind of sit around and help, and, thought that while they were there, they might as well clean stuff up. So there was no crime scene by the end. The whole entire house was contaminated with other people. So any clue that there might have been on what happened to these women was just gone. It wasn't until much later in the day on June 7th when Stacy's mom, Janice, finally called a non-emergency number to report the missing women to the police department. And again, I also don't blame Janice for this. First of all, there was police officers out there very quickly. Anyway, I don't think that this made that much of a difference that she didn't call 911, but I think I've watched interviews with Janice, and she said she just didn't want to bother 911 with something like that she did not think was an emergency, but she still just, was starting to wonder if something was wrong. There was no signs that a crime even occurred. No blood, no other evidence in the house that investigators could find. Now, it's possible there was something and it got accidentally cleaned up though. So investigators came and they found that it's likely the two girls did make it home and they started getting ready for bed. Their jewelry was laying around. They clearly took off their jewelry. There was evidence by dirty cloths covered in makeup that they had taken off their makeup. Stacy left her shorts by her side of the bed folded up. And because Stacy was slightly larger than Susie, people said that Stacy would not have fit into Susie's clothes. So wherever they went, Stacy was likely just in underwear and a t-shirt. So this, of course, raised a very, very red flag, and this was not good at all. Police officers knew that somebody probably isn't just going to walk out of the house willingly with no pants on. It was starting to become clear that they weren't just hanging out somewhere, that something happened. There was foul play or they left in a hurry for some reason. Now, here's another very strange detail about the day they went missing, and forgive me, I cannot find like a solid story exactly what happened. The whole timeline is all a little convoluted with all the different witnesses and everything like that. But another strange detail that I have to point out here is that on this day, there was weird phone calls being made to the house. I believe it was Janelle who picked up the phone, and there was some creep on the other end making sexual innuendos over the phone. Janelle, of course, quickly hung up, but the person called back again, like almost immediately. She picked up yet again, and the person, it was the same creep, so she hung up on them again. And then Janice, Stacy's mom, reported that when she went to go call the police department, there was a voice message left on the answering machine, and she just said that it was a strange message, but to this day we won't know the details because Janice accidentally deleted the message. We still don't know what it said to this day. That part of this case is very frustrating. However, police said that it was possible the phone calls had nothing to do with their disappearance. Maybe it was just some boy or boys in Susie's class that were making prank phone calls or, whatever, but we don't know for sure. But for me, that just does not sound like a coincidence. I think that's really creepy, and I can't believe that message was deleted. 30 years ago, we can't recover messages off of our devices like we can today. I know the family meant well, and I know that this was 30 years ago where, we didn't know the stuff we do about crime scenes today, but damn, I bet the family feels so guilty about all the what ifs and all of the things that might have been collected had they not messed up what they didn't know at the time was a total crime scene. I mean, whoever the perpetrator of this crime was struck gold, won the lottery because of the evidence that was likely destroyed, that likely prevented them from ever getting caught. So like I said, officers actually came pretty quickly and pretty quickly also determined that the three women were most likely in danger. The search, of course, blew up. I mean, 3 missing women from a small town. People in the area, of course, became very fearful, afraid that there was a killer on the loose, or at least a kidnapper on the loose. Thousands and thousands of missing persons posters went up. This story was on 48 Hours and America's Most Wanted. Many, many leads and tips came flooding in, but unfortunately never led to any major discoveries. Investigators, they got so desperate for any clues that they were following around buzzards, like group of buzzards, to see if they would be led to a body or some sort of clue. The department even tried some psychics and tarot card readers. Nothing came out of that, of course, but have psychics ever helped any case ever? Really. Anyway, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, and months sadly turned into years. Susie and Cheryl were finally declared legally dead by their family members on the 5-year anniversary of their disappearance. Stacy's family, even though they do understand that most likely she isn't alive anymore, they will not declare her legally dead. They said that they are not going to do so until her remains are found. I totally understand both sides of this. On the one hand, you just never want to give up hope, and if till you know for sure, why would you declare them passed away? But I also understand for Susie and Cheryl's family, I'm sure they just wanted some type of closure, even if they had to make the closure themselves so that they could grieve and try to get on with their lives. Okay, so that's the disappearance, but of course we are not going to leave here today without talking about all the theories and the possible suspects. So first, let's talk about a few witnesses. There was a woman that came forward a few days after the women had gone missing and it blew up in the media, and she finally came forward and said that around sunrise on June 7th, she saw an older model Dodge van in the color moss green pull into the driveway, like next door to her. This witness lived about 2 miles away from where Cheryl's house was, from where they disappeared. This witness claims that there was a blonde woman in the driver's seat that looked a lot like Susie. She said that the driver looked shaken, looked very, very scared, and claims that she heard a man from the vehicle behind Susie in the back seat say something along the lines of, "Don't do anything stupid." Another man who was sitting in front of a grocery store one day claims that he also saw a blonde woman that looked like Susie pull into the grocery store and stop there for a few minutes like she was waiting for someone. She was also in a van type vehicle, and the man thought that it was so strange for some reason. His instincts, I guess, told him that it was strange, that he jotted down the license plate number on a newspaper. But he obviously didn't think it was so strange because he ended up throwing the newspaper away. I don't know if he just didn't think it was important or if he just accidentally threw it away. And then in December, the same year that they disappeared, 1992, a strange man called into the America's Most Wanted hotline. He claimed that he had important information on the disappearances, but unfortunately the line got disconnected and they were never able to track down this man. This case is so frustrating, like everything that could go wrong goes wrong. And then here's a very strange one. There was another tip that came in that said that this person knew where the bodies were. This tipster said that they were buried underneath the parking garage at Cox Hospital. In 2007, a crime reporter actually did get a mechanical engineer, and they both went up to that structure where it was said that they were and investigated. They actually scanned that area of the parking garage with ground penetrating radar, and they did in fact find about 3 anomalies that were all about the same size of each other and in this one area. 2 of them were like parallel to each other and one was perpendicular. So that was strange, but the police department refused to dig up the parking garage. Now, before you get mad like I originally did, there was absolutely no evidence from the tipster to suggest that this was actually a reliable tip. The tipster said they were either a psychic or they had had a quote unquote like vision that the women were there. They had no other reason to believe that. And then another thing is that that parking garage hadn't even started construction until 1993, a year after the women went missing. So why would their bodies be perfectly in the concrete like that? The interviewer that was talking to the investigator that was, disputing this theory did ask, well, what if they had been buried in that area and then the construction was on top of them? And he said, well, the whole area would have been bulldozed before they started construction. So that just does not seem possible to me. Even if they had totally missed bodies in there when they were bulldozing, I mean, the bones and stuff would have been all in separate areas. They wouldn't have been 3 perfect anomalies together. Anyway, there just was not enough reason to tear apart a parking garage based on a psychic's hunch. So the other thing people wonder, we do assume that it was a male perpetrator. That's just the most likely scenario. But was it one man or was it several? A lot of people do believe that it must have been several perpetrators, because how would one man carry out the kidnapping and likely the deaths of 3 women altogether? Especially carrying all that out without leaving an ounce of evidence behind. However, investigators point out that if it was multiple men, surely one of them would have cracked by now, so that doesn't seem likely. And it could have just been one man, like if he knew the women, so they let him in and then he threatened them, or, you know, had a weapon, something like that. There's this other theory that the women were lured out of the house somehow, that some man came to the door dressed like a utility worker, and the reason he was there in the middle of the night is because somebody reported that there was a gas leak, you know, in the area or in that house. And so the women had to get out as quickly as possible because of this gas leak. And is that how he got them out, got them to leave in a hurry, leave all their stuff there, and then he was able to either subdue them or threaten them into a vehicle? Was it somebody that the women knew, or one of them knew, as there was no sign of a struggle and the door was unlocked? So somebody must have let them in. The only sign of a possible struggle or possible any sort of fight was that that porch light was broken. So now for the two very specific theories and suspects. Susie had an ex-boyfriend. He was kind of like said to be a, you know, like what you'd think of as a bad boy. He and some friends had apparently gotten into some trouble for grave robbing. When Susie found out about this, not only was she apparently disgusted by what he had done, but she broke up with him like on the spot. It's also thought that perhaps Susie was the one that turned her ex-boyfriend and his friends into the police, as she had also agreed to testify against them at their trial, which was set to happen in only a few months. However, this lead also went nowhere. They did question these men, and they all denied it, of course, but they also had no evidence that ever linked them to the women's disappearance. But again, I have to stay open to this theory because with the crime scene being so messed up, who knows? And this person did have a motive. But even if so, without any evidence, we cannot accuse him of that, and we just don't know. So then there was also a very promising suspect named Robert Craig Cox. He was in prison in 1997, convicted of armed robbery and kidnapping. In 1988, he had actually been arrested and convicted of the death of a young woman who was a Disney World employee that he killed in Florida. However, Robert was able to appeal his conviction in 1989 due to lack of evidence. This worked and he got out, but then he landed in jail, I think for life again for his other crimes. However, during 1992, he was out of prison, and it's proven that he lived in Springfield, Missouri at the time the women went missing. He also worked with Stacy's father at the time in 1992. So a lot of people wonder if he met Stacy through her dad and then somehow became obsessed with her. He was even interviewed by police when the women went missing because they did almost suspect him, but he had a solid alibi, and his girlfriend corroborated it. He was at church the morning that the women disappeared, and he was at his parents' house sleeping the night before. However, his girlfriend came forward later and said that that alibi was not true. He asked her to say that, and at the time she did. When journalists interviewed him, he claims that he does know what happened to the women and that he claims their bodies will never be found. However, he also told journalists that he is going to tell the world what happened to them after his mother passes away. I don't know about this guy. All the circumstantial evidence definitely lines up, and I do find it odd that he asked his girlfriend to create an alibi for him. But as we know, false confessions are also not a rare thing. Lots of people do it. Even criminals confess to crimes, other crimes that they didn't commit, just because they like the attention or they get some weird high for taking credit for something that somebody else did. I think if he really wanted to be convicted and get the attention for this, he would have led investigators to the bodies or given them some other type of solid evidence. The whole like holding everybody captive until his mother passes away, like that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That seems a lot like, I want attention, so I'm gonna say these cryptic, creepy things. So that just seems very weird. However, I do think that some of that evidence does really line up, and I would be interested to know if someday he will finally give more information or if some clues come. I don't think anybody will ever stop looking for any of the remains of the women, and maybe someday we'll find something. Overall, just a very sad case. This one just blows my mind. Like I said, it really frustrates me that everything that could have gone wrong in the crime scene pretty much did go wrong, and I just wonder what could have been found out and if somebody would have been held responsible for this had the crime scene not been so messed up inadvertently by the family and friends. But three women all together, I mean, they were all very small women, which is very important. Like, they might not have been able to overpower somebody. But yeah, this one is just one that, you know, will bug you for forever until it's solved. All right from NBC News. At the time of the disappearance, Cheryl Levitt was 47 years old, 5 feet, 110 pounds, with short, blonde bleached, naturally curly hair and freckles on her neck and upper chest area. Her daughter, Susie Streeter, was 19 years old, 5'2", 102 pounds, with brown eyes and straight bleached blonde hair. She had a 3.5-inch scar on the top of her right forearm and a small tumor in the left corner of her mouth. Stacy McCall was 18 years old, 5'3", 120 pounds, with blue eyes and dark blonde hair. She had freckles on her face and a dimple in the middle of her chin. Cheryl would be 77 years old today. Susie would be 49, 2 years older than her mother was when they disappeared, and Stacy would be 48 years old. On the screen now, I'll show you some age progressed photos of them. So the Springfield Police Department are offering a $42,000 reward for anybody that can come forward with information that leads to a conviction. If you know anything about this case or have any tips for police, you can call the number on the screen now, including Crime Stoppers at 417-869-TIPS, which is 8477. That's Crime Stoppers. There's also a 24-hour voice line, so you don't have to even talk to anybody. Okay, friends, that is going to be it for today. Say goodbye to the background because I am literally moving. Like, pretty much none of my stuff is actually in my apartment around me, just my studio setup. And I am literally moving tomorrow, and I'm going to refresh my background when I get to the new place. I have some new stuff and new lights and stuff for the background. So goodbye, old background. We're gonna give you a little makeover. Thank you so much to all my patrons. Special shout out to top tiers Colin Holmes, Deck of Cards, Michelle Valdovinos, Tom L, JJ, Quasi Eli, Little Kittle Cat, Whimsicott Fan, Delta Wolf 776, Mitchell Meyer, Mike, Alice Paul, Dark-Sided Otter, Brittany Phillips, JB Funk, Willow Winchester, Amanda Klein, Bambi, and Nianu Keanu.